This is the man from Modesto. I want to talk to you about the use of psychology to manipulate you. The secret society Satanists have been doing this for decades, and they're very adept at it. During the Obama campaign, his first campaign for presidency, the American Psychological Association actually issued a statement declaring that they recognized that he was manipulating the subconscious mind. And they said and it was basically a letter of disapproval, like saying, hey, this is inappropriate and it should not be done. There are many simple ways to do it. In one Michelle Obama speech, and again, I'm not explicitly coming against the leaders of our nation or some other stuff, but I'm telling you that I want you to be aware of what's happening to you, because once you're aware of something, it's really easy to defeat its effect in your life. So if she will speak slowly, then it causes the listener to pull in and to listen attentively to what you're saying. So Michelle Obama does a couple of speeches like this. It's a little different than the Captain James T. Kirk like pseudo-theatrical version, but it's something. You can go look at some of the old speeches from her during the campaign. She did that. There are other things as well that Obama did when he was campaigning against Hillary Clinton. Anytime she stood up, he also immediately stood up, and he would lean over her and lift his jaw. And that's because there are psychological studies which have been performed which show that if someone will stand up and lean over another person, that anybody looking at that imagery will attribute more power and authority to the person who's leaning over the other. So these are kinds of like cheap tactics so that you're trying to get into your head without you really knowing that you're doing it. Another thing is to always mention Obama's name in conjunction with the name of somebody famous who's also well-liked in history. The main names he used were Lincoln, very favorable in the subconscious mind, or whatever you want to say, of the American people, as well as JFK. And he tried a few times to go for Reagan, but people really didn't go for it. So he's just using psychology to associate his name with things that you associate with positively in your mind. And here's how that kind of works. In your mind, you form clusters of words. So words go together, so that if I grab one word from your long-term memory and bring it up into the short-term working platform, I also drag all the other words in that cluster a little bit closer, right? So it's like it's kind of like a spongy link, right? I grab that one, like imagine like a snowflake with a whole bunch of prongs coming off it, right? And I grab one of those and I pull it. It stretches it out a little bit, but it pulls it over kind of like a weak spring that doesn't have like perfect springiness or whatever you want to say, right? So it brings it over, it makes it more active. And the more I do that, the more that whole cluster of words comes into your short-term memory. And it'll make you more likely to use a word from that cluster in speech or in thought. So, so for example, somebody, a police agency investigating a crime that they think is a crime of hate, a hate crime, they can perform a certain line of questioning where they will elicit answers for a person. And as they do that, they force that person to go into their mind and pull up their word clusters and activate them. So they will do things that are loosely associated with racism. And if the person has a big cluster of racist thought, it'll bring up all those words. And then when they ask other questions that normally would receive a certain limited range of answers, but possibly a word which also is a racist term, they'll bring up the racist word. And so this will help them to understand that this person has racism, but he's just hiding it. And so the person can give that up without knowing it. Anyway, that's just one application of the use of knowing that this is how the human mind works, that it forms clusters of words, and that if you just activate one word, you activate the whole cluster. So here's the thing that's really interesting to me, is that recently there was the Boston Marathon bombing, and then there was the Marathon oil refinery explosion. Okay, if you didn't read about that one, the Boston Marathon is getting a lot of news, but there have also been 4 attacks in the United States in April 2013. There's been one in Mobile, Alabama. They 2 barges that transport fuel, gas in gas form. Everyone's there, butane or something like this. Those blew up near Mobile, Alabama. Marathon Oil Refinery, I just mentioned, is in Detroit. And of course, the West Texas fertilizer plant there, that also blew up. So it's real interesting that those things all blew up. For one reason is that those are things that if there were in fact a kind of a revolution and the American government had some secret army of 1 million plus foreign troops from Cuba and Ukraine and other foreign countries, and those were going to be used to enforce an illegal type of martial law on the American people, that those would be places that could be resources for resistance. Right? Basically, they would be considered logistics. So it'd be, so if someone were looking at a future war, they could say they're attacking the potential logistics and supply chain for a future resistance army. You could say that. That's really not the point of my video. I'm talking about the psychological aspects. So here's this word marathon. It comes up twice, right? So what's that going to do? It's going to activate any words that you associate with marathon. Well, of course, there's the marathon, but what many people have also heard is that the marathon is based upon a real event in world history, and it's this, that the Persian army, modern day Iran, landed about 35 kilometers, actually the traditional history is that it's 26.1 miles away, northeast of the city of Athens, Greece, and they were going to attack it. But a runner there, his name is something like Phidippides, cleans this distance at a full run, arrives at Athens and warns them, the Persians have landed at Marathon, right? So that's the name of the place where they landed, Marathon. It's the beginning of the attack of the Iranians from the east, right? So this would activate in your mind without you being aware of it, just like this guilty racist in the earlier explanation I used, the example I used, right? It would activate in your memory everything associated with Marathon, which includes an attack from Iran. So I'm just curious, this is complete speculation here, that if there was some attack later, would people begin to blame the Iranians? It would be more likely. Just applying science, scientific thought, psychology, it would be more likely. Now, if somebody were known to be using a lot of psychology, that just gives like one more point in the column for maybe they're doing that. And so I'm really suspicious. I want to warn you ahead of time, like if they start blaming the Iranians for something, there's not some really, really good evidence, just understand that it looks like they're going to try to blame the Iranians for something. But meanwhile, here's another key factor, is that very recently, just 4 weeks ago, immediately preceding all these attacks on American soil, Barack Obama signed open travel between the United States and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the home of Wahhabism. So this is the man from Modesto. Remind you as always to use your mind, use your logic, but always, always, always pray or be defeated. Because money and wisdom can give you a good life, but only wisdom can save your life.